These were just a few experiments among hundreds that we ran week in and week out as we started to learn which customer would use the product and why. Each bit of knowledge we gather suggested new experiment to run, which move our matrix closer and closer to our goal, the audacity of zero. Despite IMBU's early success, our gross numbers were still pretty small, unfortunately, because of the traditional way business are evaluated. This is the dangerous situation. The irony is that it is often easier to raise money or acquire other resources when you have zero revenue, zero customers, and zero traction than when you have a small amount. Zero invites imagination, but the small numbers invite questions about whether large numbers will ever materialize. Everyone knows or thinks he or she knows. A story of products that achieve breakthrough success overnight as long as nothing has been released and no data has been collected. It is still possible to imagine overnight success in the future. Small numbers pour cold water on the hoop. This phenomenon creates a brutal incentive postpones getting any delays have the unfortunate effects of increasing the amount of wasted work, decreasing essential feedback, and dramatically increasing the risk that a startup will build something nobody wants. Whoever releasing a product and hoping for the best is not a good plan either, because this incentive is real. When we launched IMBU, we were ignorant of this problem. Our earliest investors and advisors thought it was kind that we had a $300 per month revenue plan at first, but after several months with our revenue hovering around $500 per month, some began to lose faith as we did. Some of our advisors, employees, and even spouses. In fact, at one point, some investors were seriously recommending that we pull the product out of the market and return to stall mode. Unfortunately, as we pivoted and experimented incorporating what we learned into our product development and marketing efforts, our numbers started to improve, but not by much. On the one hand, we were lucky to see a growth pattern started to look like the famous hockey stick graph. On the other hand, the graph went up only to a few $1,000s per month. These early graphs, although promising, were not by themselves sufficient to combat the loss of faith caused by our early failures. We lacked the language of validated learning to provide an alternative concept to rally around. We were quite fortunate that some of our early investors understood its importance and were willing to look beyond our small gross numbers to see the real progress we were making. You'll see the exact same graph they did in chapter 7. Thus, we can mitigate the waste that happens because of the audacity of zero with validated learning. What we needed to demonstrate was that our product's development efforts were leading us towards massive success without giving it to the temptation to fall back on vanity metrics and success rate. The work we do to make ourselves look successful, we could have tried marketing gimmicks, bought a Super Bowl ad, or tried flamboyant public relations PR as a way of juicing our gross numbers that would have given investors the illusion of traction, but only for a short time. Eventually, the fundamental of the business would win and the PR boom would pass because we would we would have squandered precious resources on theatrics instead of progress. We would have been in real trouble. Lesson beyond IMVU. I have had many opportunities to teach the IMBU story as a business case ever since Stanford Graduate School of Business wrote an official study about IMBU's early year. The case is now part of the entrepreneurship curriculum at several business schools, including Harvard Business School, where I serve as entrepreneur in residence. I've also told these stories at countless workshop lectures and conference. Each time I teach the IMBU story, students have an overwhelming temptation to focus on the tactics. It illustrates launching a low quality early prototype, charging customers from day one, and using low volume revenue target as a way to drive accountability. These are useful techniques, but they are not the moral of the story. There are too many exceptions. Not every kind of customer will accept a low quality prototype. For example, if the students are more skeptical, they may argue that the techniques do not apply to their industry or situation but work only because IMV uses a software company, a consumer internet business, or non mission critical application. None of these takeaways is especially useful. The lean startup is not a collection of individual tactics, it is a principled approach to new product development. The only way to make sense of its recommendation is to understand the underlying principles that make them work, as we'll see in later chapters. The lean startup model has been applied to a wide variety of business and industries: manufacturing, clean tech, restaurants, and even laundry. The tactics from the IMBU's story may or may not make sense in your particular business. Instead, the way forward is to learn to see every startup in any industry as a grand experiment. The question is not, can this product be built? In the modern economy, almost any product that can be imagined can be built. The more pertinent questions are, should this product be built, and can we build a sustainable business around this set of products and services? To answer those questions, we need a method for systematically breaking down a business plan into its component parts and testing each part empirically. In other words, we need the scientific method in the lean startup model. Every product, every feature, every marketing campaign, everything a startup does is understood to be experiment designed to achieve validated learning. This experimental approach works across industries, sector, as we'll see in chapter 4. Number 4, experiment. I come across many startups that are struggling to answer the following questions: which customers' opinions should we listen to, if any? How should we prioritize across the many features we could build? Which features are essentials to the product successful and which are ancillary? What can be charged, what can be changed safely, and what might anger customer, what might please today customer at the expense of tomorrow? What should we work on next? These are some of the questions teams struggle to answer if they have followed the let's just ship a product and see what happens plan. I call this the Just Do It School of Entrepreneurship, after Nick famous slogan. Unfortunately, if the plan is to see what happens, a team is guaranteed to succeed at seeing what happened but won't necessarily gain validated learning. This is one of the most important lessons of the scientific method. If you cannot fail, you cannot learn. From alchemy to science. The lean startup methodology reconceive a startup effort as an experiment that tests its strategy to see which parts are brilliant and which are crazy. A two experiment X follows the scientific method. It begins with a clear hypothesis that makes predictions about what is supposed to happen, if then tests those predictions empirically, just as scientific experimentation is informed by theory. Startup experimentation is guided by the startup vision. The goal of every startup experiment is to discover how to build a sustainable business around the vision. Think big, start small. Zappos is the world's largest only shoe store with annual gross sales in excess of 1 billion. It is known as one of the most successful customer-friendly e-commerce business in the world, but it did not start that way. Founder Nick Swimmer was frustrated because there was no central online site with a great selection of shoes. He envisioned a new and superior retail experience. Swimmer could have waited a long time, insisting on testing his complete vision, complete with warehouse distribution partner and the promise of significant sales. Many early e-commerce pioneers did just that, including infamous .com failures such as Webvan and Pats.com. Instead, he started by running an experiment. His hypothesis was that customers were ready and willing to buy shoes online. To test it, he began by asking local shoes local shoes store if he could take pictures of their inventory. In exchange for permission to take the pictures, he would post the picture online and come back to buy the shoes at full price if a customer bought them online. Zappos began with a tiny simple product. It was designed to answer one question above all: is there already sufficient demand for a superior online shopping experience for shoes? However, a well-designed startup experiment like the one Zappos began with does more than a test single aspect of a business plan. In the course of testing the first assumptions, many other assumptions were tested as well. To sell the shoes, Zappos had to interact with customers, taking payment, handling returns, and dealing with customer support. This is decidedly different from market research. If Zappos had relied on existing market research and conducted a survey, it could have asked what customer true they wanted. By building a product instead, albeit a simple one, the company learned much more. It had more accurate data about customer demand because it is observing a real customer behavior, not asking hypothetically questions. It put itself in a position to interact with real customers and learn about their needs. For example, the business plan might call for discounted pricing, but how are customer perception of the product affected by the discounting strategy? It allowed itself to be surprised when customers behave in unexpected ways, revealing information Zappos might not have known to ask about. For example, what if customer returned the shoes? Zappos' initial experiment provided a clear quantifiable outcome. Either a sufficient number of customers would buy shoes or they would not. It also put the company in a position to observe, interact with, and learn from real customer and partners. This qualitative learning is necessary companion to quantitative testing, although the earlier efforts were decidedly small scale that did not prevent the huge Zappos vision from being realized. In fact, in 2009, Zappos were acquired by the e-commerce giant Amazon.com for a reported 1.2 billion for long-term change experiments immediately. Caroline Berlin is a director in the Global Social Innovation Division at Hewlett Packard HP, a multinational company with more than 300,000 employees and more than $100 billion in annual sales. Caroline, who leads global community involvement in the social entrepreneur working to get more of HP's employees to take advantage of the company policy on volunteering. Corporate guidelines encourage every employee to spend up to 4 hours a month of company time volunteering in his or her community. That volunteer work could take the form of any philanthropic effort, painting fences, building houses, or even using pro bono or work based skills outside the company. Encouraging the latter type of volunteering was Caroline priority because of its talent and values. HP combined workforce has a potential to have a monumental positive impact. A designer could help a non-profit with a new website design. A team of engineers could wire a school for internet access. Caroline project is just beginning and most employers do not know that this volunteering policy exists and only a tiny fraction take advantage of it. Most of the volunteering has been of the low impact variety involving manual labor and even when the volunteer were highly trained experts. Berlin vision is to take the hundreds of thousands of employees in the company and transform them into a force for social good. This is the kind of corporate initiative undertaken every day at companies around the world. It doesn't look like a startup by the conventional definition or what we see in the movies. On the surface, it seems to be suited to traditional management and planning. However, I hope the discussion in chapter 2 has prompt you to be a little suspicious here how we might analyze this project using the lean startup framework. Caroline project faces extreme uncertainty. There had never been a volunteer campaign of this magnitude at Ashby before. How confident should she be that she knows the real reason people aren't volunteering? Most important, how much does she really knows about how to change the behavior of hundreds of thousands of people in more than 170 countries? Berlin goal is to inspire her colleagues to make the world a better place. Look, Look at that way. Her plan seems full of untested assumptions and a lot of vision. In accordance with traditional management practices, Berlin is spending time planning, getting buy in from various departments and other managers, and preparing a roadmap of initiative for the first 18 months of her project. She also has a strong accountability framework with metrics for the impact her project should have on the company over the next 4 years. Like many entrepreneurs, she has a business plan that lays out her intention nicely. Yet, despite all that work, she is so far creating one off wins and no closer to knowing if her vision will be able to scale. One assumption, for example, might be that the company long standing values, including a commitment to improving the community, but that reason economic trouble had resulted in an increased company-wide strategy focus on short-term profitability. Perhaps long-time employees would feel a desire to reaffirm their values of giving back to the community by volunteering. A second assumption could be that they would find it more satisfying and therefore more sustainable to use their actual workplace skills in volunteer capacity, which would have a great impact on behalf of the organization to which they devote their time. Also lurking within Caroline plans are many practical assumptions about employees' willingness to take the time to volunteer, their level of commitment and desire, and the way to best reach them with her message. The lean startup model offer a way to test these hypotheses rigor- rigorously, immediately, and thoroughly. Strategic planning takes months to complete. These experiments could begin immediately by starting small. Caroline could prevent a tremendous amount of waste down the road without compromising her overall vision. Here's what it might look like Caroline were to treat her project as an experiment. Break it down. The first step would be to break down the grand vision into its component parts. The two most important assumptions entrepreneurs make are what I call the value hypothesis, the growth hypothesis. The value hypothesis tests whether a product or service really deliver value to customer once they are using it. What's a good indicator that employee find donating their time valuable? We could survey them to get their opinion, but that would not be very accurate because most people have a hard time accessing their feeling objectively. Experiment provide a more accurate gauge. What could be what could we use in real time that would serve as a proxy for the value participant were gaining from volunteering? We could find opportunities for a small number of employees to volunteer and then look at the retention rate of those employees. How many of them sign up to volunteer again? When an employee voluntarily invest their time and attention in this program, that is a strong indicator that they find it's valuable. For the growth hypothesis, which test how new customer will discover a product or service, we can do a similar analysis once the program is up and running. How well it is spread among the employees from initial early adopters to mass adoptions throughout the company. Unlikely way this program could expand its true viral growth. If that is true, the most important thing to measure is behavior. Would the early participant actively spread the word to other employees? In this case, a simple experiment would involve taking a very small numbers, a dozen perhaps, or existing long term employees and providing an exceptional volunteer opportunity for them. Because Caroline hypothesis was that employees would be motivated by their desire to live up to HP historical commitment to community service. The experiment would target employees who felt the greatest sense of disconnect between their daily routine and the company express value. The point is not to find the average customer, but to find early adopters, the customers who feel the need for the product most accurately. Those customers tends to be more forgiving of mistakes and are especially eager to give feedback. Next, using a technique I call the concierge minimum viable product described in detail in chapter 6. Caroline could make sure that first few participants had an experience that was as good as she could make it completely aligned with her vision. Unlike in a focus group, her goal would be to measure what the customer actually did. For example, how many of the first volunteers actually complete their volunteer assignment, how many volunteer a second time, how many are willing to recruit a college, how many are willing to recruit a colleagues to participate in a subsequent volunteer activity.